YouTube family! Welcome to another Two Family Homestead live stream. Woo!
I'm supposed to be talking, aren't I? I'm busy typing.
Action.
I'm typing.
Action.
I'm interacting with the folks here, especially when I see Sean in Alaska come in, and he laughs at me because he knows every time he comes in that flippin' song goes through my head. Grace, how you doing? Are you safe up where you are? I worry about you because I know you're in Northern California. Lisa Burns, glad to have you here. I came from Stivers also. How about that? Whiskey and sunshine off grid. Whiskey. I've never had whiskey. I don't do hard liquor. My drinks have to be sweet.
Yeah.
If I'm going to get drunk, I'm not going to know about it till the next morning when I'm praying to the porcelain god. Farmer Meemaw. How you doing, Jen? Enriched refuge. Cornish exploring with Alex. Oh, we don't do that, especially not on a Monday night. You're more than welcome to come back Thursday evenings when we do the content creator and put your name up on our wheel. Lisa Burns, glad to have you here. Watching from the UK. Both my granddads were from England, so glad to have you here. It must be, what, 2 a.m. or so there? Bless you for being up that early. Well, I guess I'm up that early.
Sometimes.
Again.
Yeah.
So, our guest tonight is the Impatient Gardener. I've waited a long time. I don't even remember when I contacted her. Some of our guests we contacted last year. That's how far in advance. I mean, I have a Franklin planner that I have to write our guest's name down on. And, yeah, that's how far in advance some of them go. Hide your cats, Grizz is in the room. So anyway, Erin is from Wisconsin. And I think we should bring her out.
The cheese state.
The cheese state.
We'll have to ask her about that. See if she grows
Cheddar?
cheese in her garden.
Cheddar, Swiss,
Swiss, cheddar,
I don't know.
mozzarella.
I don't think mozzarella. That would be Chicago, like Italian.
Okay.
I mean, to me, what do I know? Yeah, bring her on the screen. Let's make sure your questions are in all caps.
We're testing your patience.
You're testing mine too.
There she is.
We go back and forth.
Hi, guys.
We go back and forth like this all the time. Yeah.
I love it.
Rosanna Dana, glad you are here. And Ted, welcome. Royal Amethyst Acres. Royal Amethyst Acres will be our guest in 2 weeks, Labor Day.
Okay, the Impatient Gardener. Do you have a favorite thing we should call you?
You can call me Erin.
Okay, I just wanted to check. I didn't know if you wanted your
Yep.
name private, hidden, or
Nope.
whatever.
That's great, Erin.
First question, homemade home, is what is your favorite cheese?
I am an equal opportunity cheese lover,
There we
so
go.
it would be hard for me to choose a favorite. I do feel like Wisconsin has some superior cheddars, though.
That's why I thought Wisconsin was pretty much known for cheddars.
Yep.
Big Bear, how you doing?
You know, you weren't. I don't think you were listening earlier, but when I was talking with her, she said she was on Holly and Joey's show
Yeah,
just a few
Wisconsin.
weeks ago.
Yeah. I told you I could hear the chat.
I don't know how you could hear the chat. You didn't have your headphones on.
That's right here, and I have very good hearing.
Sometimes too good.
Well, then you should know I heard it.
So
What can I tell you?
how long has the Impatient Gardener been gardening?
I have been well, like a lot of people, I started gardening as a child. My mom is a huge gardener, so we had little gardens as kids. And then, I enjoyed it, but it wasn't something that stuck with me a lot then. And then I got out of college and I got my first apartment, and I tried to grow a window box on a north-facing balcony, which was largely unsuccessful. And then I moved to another apartment with son, and then it was kind of all over from there. I just sort of fell in love with it again. And so that was, the late 90s. So since then, and then we moved into this house that we're in now in 2002. So I've been gardening here for 17 years now.
Now, your gardens, are they primarily flower, or are they vegetable, or just a mixture, or?
It's a mixture, but I started with mostly flowers, and I would say in terms of square footage, I have far more perennial gardens and flower gardens. But I do have a pretty large raised bed garden now. I've always had a raised bed vegetable garden. Well, not always, but for 10 years now at least. But 2 years ago, we dedicated a good amount of land to a large raised bed, fenced in raised bed garden. So now I've got a lot more vegetables and things like that going on. So, which is great.
Can I ask you how big your property is? I mean, is this?
So we have 1.3 acres, and a portion of that is wooded. So, it's probably, I would say probably, it's maybe 3/4 of an acre that we're sort of using and gardening on.
That's quite a bit, actually.
It is. It's a nice amount. I think anything more than that, I would get myself in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, I heard that. We have less than that, and I still got myself into trouble this year.
Yeah,
we are growing
I do that all the time. I created a new garden this year, and it was maybe not the right move. I can't take care of the ones I have, but I can't stop myself from making more.
Our thistle weeds are just prolific this year. I can't even tell you. Have a question. What are you planting most this fall, or are you looking forward to growing for the fall?
I just planted just this past week, like everything in my vegetable garden this year, I have been behind the 8 ball. So I have not had a great vegetable garden year. But just this past weekend, I went in and I planted some kale, which I had started ahead of time. I had a real problem with the rabbits for a little bit. Even though it's a fenced-in garden, they were coming underneath the fence, and I think we've stopped that problem, but I started everything ahead of time in small trays and then transplanted. So I put some kale in, some peas in, a little bit of lettuce in, and some beets. And so I'm hoping for fall we'll get some of those things going. The one thing in my garden that's doing really well this year is I've got some really good winter squash going this year, which I'm excited about. I grew that for the first time last year and loved it so much that I really planted a lot more this year, and that is actually looking good.
Not acorn or
so I'm growing a baby butternut, which I grew last year as well, which is really nice. It's just my husband and I, and so they make nice butternuts that are perfect for 2 people.
Mm-hmm.
And then I grew some honey nuts, and there are some acorns in there. I'm trying to think if there's anything else in there too. There was one other sort of experimental one that I'm trying. It was supposed to be great. I have no idea what it is, to be honest, but I like trying new things that I don't really know much about.
I don't think I've ever heard of a honey nut squash. I'm gonna have to check on that.
It's shaped like a butternut. Okay. I think it's some sort of butternut hybrid.
Okay, I'm gonna have to check into that because I love butternut squash. Well, I like squash. So, in fact, that's what I made for lunch. I made zucchini boats. So let's see. Barbara Bennett says, "Hi, Erin. Do Odin and Dorothy like to go sailing with you?"
Hi, Barbara. No, Odin and Dorothy. So, for anyone else who's listening, sailing is my other hobby, and so I'm doing that a lot of time. If I'm not in the garden, I'm off sailing. And Odin and Dorothy are our dogs, and no, they never go on the boat at all. In fact, they are water rescue dogs who don't particularly love the water. So I guess we messed up on that.
Daryl?
Hold on.
You're getting the phone system
I'm
ready?
working on that.
I'm scared of that because he's in the chat.
That's okay.
I don't think she knows. Oh yeah, Kiss My Grass Acres. I love fried squash or squash blossoms. Have you ever made?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, those are awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep. It's a bit smaller but similar to butternut. Thank you. I've never never even heard of that. But yeah, butternut squash, yeah, for just Daryl and me, it makes me 2 more meals after that.
Right.
Mary's Garden Grows is asking, what's your favorite dahlia?
Oh, it's, that's a little bit like I grow a lot of them. I think this year I planted close to 100 dahlias this year.
Wow.
Not 100 different varieties, but 100 plants. It's like asking sort of for your favorite child. This year I'm growing a new one, or new to me, called Penn Hill Watermelon. And the first bloom I got out of it was 10 inches across, and these beautiful apricot and yellow colors with these sort of twisted petals. So that's currently the one that I'm sort of having a little love affair with, but it changes from day to day. Probably my favorite, sort of my all-time go-to one that I really wouldn't ever be without is a ball dahlia called Crichton Honey.
Those are huge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's the biggest dahlia I've ever grown, and the rest of them are not going to be that big. They tend to get a little smaller, and they have been. But I couldn't believe what was growing out there.
Yeah, some of my hibiscus, the blooms are that large. Kiss My Grass Acres. What is your favorite snack from the garden?
Cherry tomatoes and peas, sugar snap peas. I don't know that I've ever had a sugar snap pea make it actually out of the garden. I basically eat them standing in the garden. I don't know if I've ever cooked one. I think I just eat them all raw in the garden.
Our friend down in Georgia, Big Bear Homestead, and he's here. His youngest daughter, Ladessa, she had a pea patch last year, and I don't know if any of them ever got into the kitchen. Did they, Jason? Because she would go out there, and that's what she would do. She'd pick them off the vine and eat them right there and then.
They're so good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, except for squashes and stuff like that. I mean, we've had our granddaughters. We helped raise them when they were small, so they've been here every summer when we had a garden, and they grew up going out in the garden, and they grew carrots one year, and they would go out in the garden and, like the tomatoes, take them off the vine, and I'm not sure if they even wiped them off, and I don't think they made it into the house.
That's the beauty of it, right?
Yeah.
Nice, fresh, organic fruit. Just go for it.
Yeah, exactly. And at least they know where it comes from. You don't have to go to Kroger and buy them. You can go.
Right.
You can go out in Nana's garden. Yeah, yeah. There's unfortunately too many, not only children but adults, that you ask them where.
Don't understand.
Don't understand that everything doesn't come from the produce department or the meat department. We were a few weeks ago. We were down in Georgia at Big Bear Homestead. It was Robin's birthday. She had a surprise birthday party. So I'm sitting there in the living room, and we're all sitting there chatting. And I had a direct view through the front door, and their garden is out in the front yard. They have raised beds, and they painted each raised bed a different color, and it's just stunning. I love it. Well, all of a sudden, I'm looking up, and there's a cow. And the cows are, the cows are fenced in, way over there. So I'm going, cow, and everybody's looking at me, and I'm going, cow, sort of like the movie Twister, Twister. And all of a sudden, they get up and look, and there's, I think, 2, 3 of them. And the longhorn, who has horns out to Lord knows where, they're all munching on the grass. And around, they were doing lawn mowing. They were munching all around the beds. One of them did eat all the kale. Mm-hmm. So,
oh my gosh.
So at least they eat good there. Oh.
Okay, and we've got the phone lines up and open. If anybody'd like to call in and talk to Erin directly, wish her happy birthday and all that stuff. I don't know when her birthday is, but.
Oh, I was going to say.
No, it's no time soon.
Oh, I was going to say, I didn't think it was today. My daughter's is tomorrow.
Well, you can wish Sherry's daughter a happy birthday. And she's not in here either.
No, she's not in here either. Our backwoods homestead loves snacking on my cucumbers when harvesting. Oh, yeah, especially the small ones because they're so tender.
Mhm.
Oh,
So, what's your favorite thing to grow in Wisconsin? What do you look forward to planting every year?
So, I mean, I really have this borderline ideas. So, I do love growing those, but I like to grow a lot of flowers from seed every year and try out new things that you could never go find in a nursery if you tried. So every year I try to grow some, and I've got sort of a list of the things I don't want to be without. But I also try to grow things that I've not grown before. So I really like, for instance, annual vines. Every year I grow some different annual vines because there's so many cool ones out there. So this year I'm growing purple bell vine for the first time, and that is a really neat plant. And I'm growing hyacinth bean, which I have grown before, but that's also a great plant. So I like to experiment sort of with growing some things from seed that you might not be able to find somewhere else, and just sort of see how they go and see if they make the list for the next year.
Toad in the Garden says, "Hi, Erin. What is the one thing that you've had trouble growing that you wish you could?"
There's a lot of things I wish I could grow that I don't much. Actually, lavender. I have a really hard time growing lavender here. It just doesn't overwinter. I can grow it as an annual, but it's not. We just don't have enough. Even though we've got quite sandy soil here, I don't have enough between the cold and the wet and the snow. It doesn't seem to work very well for me. So I wish I could do better at growing lavender. And I wish, we're close enough to Lake Michigan that we have a little microclimate here, which means that spring hangs on forever. Now, we get that paid back in fall because it stays warm here much longer into the season. But it does make it a little bit of a challenge to grow really, really good tomatoes. I mean, I grow a lot of tomatoes and I'll never stop trying, but I'm never going to produce a perfect tomato or a lot of perfect tomatoes because it just doesn't get hot enough here for long enough for them to really thrive.
Yeah.
Do you have a greenhouse?
I don't. I have sort of a temporary pop-up greenhouse that I will put up in spring to harden off the stuff that I've been growing in the house. But once I plant everything in the ground, that goes away, and it's not at all insulated really in any way. So it's just it's more of a hardening off house than a greenhouse.
Question is, have you ever grown the toothache plant?
I have not. It's a cool plant, but I have never grown that.
Pandora's Homestead. What's the one plant that you regret growing?
Oh gosh, there's a couple of them. A couple of those plants that, boy, it's hard to come back from. Early on, I grew an Artemisia called Limelight, which was this sort of really cool variegated Artemisia that in the course of one summer spread so far, so fast. I didn't see any of it this year, but I truly think that I was still pulling pieces of it up for 10 years. I also, when I first started gardening here, and really I learned to garden in the ground here. I was fairly proficient at container gardening before I got here, but when we first got here, of course, I was just basically taking pass-along plants from people, and of course, pass-along plants are wonderful gifts, except there's a reason people have extras of them, so you tend to get things that do move along quickly. And there is a coreopsis that I got that has made me swear off coreopsis. Now I've got some gardening friends who tell me I need to get back and try it again, that and I know there are much better varieties out there that are far better behaved, but I still have sort of PTSD from that coreopsis. And I would say probably, though, the worst case was that, and I share this story fairly frequently, is that when I first started gardening, and I was sort of in that stage where I didn't know, there were some gardens here when we moved in, and I didn't know what was a weed and what was a plant. And so I would have, my mom would come over and we would do the weed or plant deal, walking around. And there was this really pretty flower on a tall stem with all these pretty little bells purple bells hanging from it. And she said, that is a weed, you need to get rid of that. And this was creeping bellflower. And I said, I said, a weed is just a plant you don't want. It's beautiful. I'm going to keep that. She said, okay, good luck with that. And to this day, I am battling that weed. And I think I read somewhere that there's like 9,000 or more seeds that can come out of one of those plants.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my God, it's everywhere. I mean, it's terrible. So I'm, and I think my mom secretly is sort of enjoys the fact that I still battle that weed, because she's like, well, I told you, but you wouldn't listen. So that's what you get.
I don't think I've ever heard of that one. I love purple, so.
Well, it's actually a really pretty, it kind of looks a little bit like a purplish hosta flower kind of thing. It's actually quite a pretty flower, but it's
invasive.
It's like Satan in the form of a plant, basically.
Well, that's sort of like mint. If you don't, if you don't plant mint in a container, I'm guilty.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes, I've had people say, "No, I really want something to take over." I'm like, I don't think you know what you wish for right now.
Yeah, I put mint in a raised bed out back behind the garage. Never thought about it, and I planted several, and I put the tags right with them so I would know this one is chocolate, this one's pineapple, an apple, and blah blah blah. And I think it's been 3 or 4 years, and I'm not sure which one is which. I think I know the pineapple because that's, I think, like light green with a white stripe on the leaf.
Yep.
And but it has gone from where I planted it. It took up the entire 12-foot raised bed, plus out into the walkway.
Oh yeah.
So when you walk, the whole garden smells of mint.
Right. I mean, there are worse things. At least you can eat it, and it smells good.
Right. When we lived here, before we even had the gardens, I brought some from the other house, just the plain, ordinary peppermint or spearmint, whichever one it was, the common stuff, and planted some alongside the driveway. 8 years later, it's prolific everywhere.
Yep.
So I'm like always offering, anybody want any mint? Oh, no, I have some. I said, oh, great.
Yeah.
Oh, Emily says, cut the flower off before it seeds. Yeah, that's true. If you catch it. If you catch it.
Yes, for sure. I mean, even if you can't get there to pull it out,
right,
get rid of that flower. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, I this year, Kiss My Grass, Red, this year I planted 3 more types of mint, but these I put into a container. So I don't have that. Beets love mint mulch. Oh, really? Never thought about that. Never thought of using my mint for mulch. It's an idea. Let's see. See if we can find any more.
I have a question for Erin.
Go ahead.
Erin, there has to be a story behind the word impatience.
Yeah, well, that's sort of how I started. That's how I started with this, is that I think probably a lot of new gardeners are guilty of this. You come in and you're like, okay, I'm ready for a garden. And then you put a plant in the ground and put a couple more plants. You're like, well, this is not exactly looking like the garden I had envisioned. And so it just kind of stemmed from me having to try to come to grips with the fact that gardening inherently requires patience, and that it was not where I started from. Although now I look back, it's funny, I look back now and I'm like, if you I look at my vegetable garden, I mean, just, 2 months ago when I was planting there, and now I'm already getting some food from that. I'm like, well, that didn't take that long. So I guess perhaps age and wisdom has taken hold and I've become slightly less impatient.
I wonder what my problem is then. He's biting his tongue. He's not even going to answer that one. Yeah.
Smart man.
Because I have always said I'm not a doctor. I don't have any patience. Nope.
So, Erin, will you share with the folks some of the different blogs or awards that you've won? I mean, you're pretty well known in some writing circles, it appears. Birds and Blooms magazine.
She has an awesome website.
Thank you. That's nice of you. Yeah, Birds in Bloom magazine featured me a couple of years ago. Last year, I won a silver medal from GardenCom, which is the Garden Writers Association, for blog writing. And there have been a few, I'm trying to think, there was a few other things over the years in there too, some awards and things. That GardenCom one was quite nice. It's always nice to be recognized by your peers. So that was a nice one.
Okay, well, since she's not going to brag on herself, some of the stuff I'm reading here is Luxury Magazine, Sailing Magazine, the Ozuki Press. Am I saying that correctly?
Ozaki Press. Yeah,
Ozaki?
that's our county newspaper. I read a column for that.
The
weekly column for that.
Wisconsin Hardy Plant Society, the Perennial Plant Association, and other organizations. So it's just a little bit different for us to have. I mean, the majority of the following that we have is geared more toward homesteading, prepping, food plots, vegetable gardens, orchards, and more eating stuff than the pretty stuff. Although I guess eating stuff can be pretty too.
Oh, yeah, actually, it's interesting because I've done a couple of, well, now this year I haven't really been doing many talks, but the past couple of years I did a talk that's quite popular. Sorry, my cat is standing behind my computer and I'm trying to make sure he doesn't knock it off. I did one of the talks that was really highly requested was one that I do on ornamental edible gardening. The idea being either make your edibles beautiful or incorporate edibles into your ornamental gardens. Mm-hmm. And I do a fair amount of that. I think I try to help people sort of dispel this idea that you have a vegetable garden where you grow your vegetables, and then you've got an ornamental garden where you grow your flowers, and the two shall never meet.
Oh, Lord,
because
they should.
Yeah, and because it's beneficial for both. Of course, it's great to bring those pollinators in for your vegetables by having some flowers in there. But also, there are so many beautiful edible plants. I mean, I think that Swiss chard is one of the most beautiful plants of any variety, especially the bright lights one, the different color stems.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I just think that with those bright, shiny, emerald green leaves, I just think that is one of the most gorgeous plants. And there's no reason why that has to be, relegated to the corner with just the vegetables if that's not what you want to do. I grow a lot of, now this year I didn't do much of it, but in the past I've grown a lot of kale as ornamental as well. And the nice thing about kale is that you can really just kind of, it still looks pretty good. You can kind of pick the leaves around the outside and keep eating it, and the rest of it still looks pretty good. So I'm all about trying to incorporate those two things. By the same token, though, I am trying to become a better vegetable gardener because I get more pleasure I get more satisfaction out of growing vegetables than I do out of growing flowers. I feel like nothing can really match that feeling you get when you harvest something that you grew from seed and it becomes your dinner. Right. Like that is the epitome of satisfaction as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, that is.
So I'm trying to get better at that.
Cool. Mama Z's Texas Kitchen, do you do any container gardening?
I do a lot of container gardening. I love container gardening. It's sort of where I started, and I love growing in containers, and especially ornamental displays. I love designing containers and putting interesting things in containers and trying new arrangements every year.
What are your thoughts on the I'm mulching in general, but where I'm heading with this is maybe non-organic. In other words, the chemical fertilizers and stuff. I know a lot of people absolutely hate them. Kind of wanted your take on it.
So my approach to it is that, well, first of all, basically my garden is entirely organic with the exception of ornamentals that I grow in containers. And so those I will use synthetic fertilizers on. I feel like those annual flowers, they sort of need that quick fast food type hit. But everything else, I try to be 100%. Now, first of all, anything edible is not open for discussion at all. So that's always all organic. And then I guess I have in the past used like a couple of problematic plants, which probably is a good sign. Maybe I shouldn't even be growing them, but like roses. I sort of try to follow like integrated pest management if it comes to some sort of pest situation. And so once in a very rare while, I will resort to a chemical after I've tried some other things, but I think it's been years since I've done that. And so I try to be as organic as possible. It's just what feels comfortable to me to do. And as far as pests go, one of the things I sort of encourage people to think about being a little bit lazier in their garden. One of the best things I ever did was I had a really busy summer. So I wasn't out there every single day staring at every single plant, like really getting in there. And so it turned out what happened was it wasn't great for the garden, but it was great for the wildlife in my garden. And I feel like the ecosystem sort of balanced itself out. So a lot of times by the time I'd find like, say, some aphids on a plant, and I'd be like, oh, I got to get back there and deal with those. By the time I got back, something else had come along to eat those aphids and take care of it. And so the garden really balanced itself out. And so now that I've sort of achieved that, it just managed itself really well. And it's nice to see wildlife in the garden. Like right now there's a tree frog crawling up my window screen above my window box that my cat is paying attention to. And my parsley and my dill is being completely overrun by swallowtail caterpillars. And these are all things that bring me a lot of joy in the garden.
Let's see, there was a question back here. Any tips on rhubarb? This is from Halfway Home. We are getting ready to move from Mississippi to Missouri to live on what was my grandma's home, and she loved her rhubarb, and my dad had asked me to keep it going, and they're lost. That's a cool question because I have my grandmother's rhubarb, which actually came from her family homestead. So I probably have rhubarb from at least my great-grandparents' house, if not my great-great-grandparents' house. The only thing I would say about rhubarb is it wants really rich soil and sun and, a good amount of water. And that seems to work for me. Now, generally speaking, spring is the time to transplant that. And I suppose if you have to try it to transplant it some other time, I always say it's always worth it. But I've only done it in spring, early on. And then all I do with my rhubarb is in fall, I try to give it a good mulch of well-rotted manure. It seems to really thrive on that rich soil treatment. Do you guys grow rhubarb? Yes, I have my mother's.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just ignore it. It's huge.
Yeah.
It just comes back every year.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yep.
That and the horseradish. I have my
horseradish will do that.
I have my some from my mother and some from her sister that was in New York, and that is huge out there. And I ignore it, and it just grows more and more every year.
Yeah, that's easily approaching 7 foot in height.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
The leaves are huge. Yeah.
Well, that's what I love about plants plants that have a connection to people we love or have a story behind them, I think are the coolest plants.
And Drop's family garden is still harvesting seeds from their parsnips. I've never grown parsnips.
I haven't either.
Now, Daryl likes kohlrabi, and he had our grandgirls try it a couple years ago, and they fell in love with it. So that's always a go. But have never tried parsnips. I'll have to try that.
Also got them going on soybeans too.
And soybeans, yeah. Yeah, we had...
Edamame.
Yeah. We had a cookout one evening when my Celia, who's now 15, she was only a kid, and boiled up some soybeans, and sat there at the table out on the deck in the pods. Yeah, in the pods, and they didn't know what to do with them. I mean, because they're fuzzy.
Yeah.
So Daryl went, and my grandson, I think, I don't know, he was a teenager, and he never had them before. So Daryl showed him, you just have to hold them and push on it, and the actual pea will pop right out. Well, he told Celia to open up her mouth, and he held the pod and popped it, and it went all the way down her throat.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Never forget
dear.
that. Yeah, never forget that. But she loves them. So yeah.
Yeah, you just take that fuzzy husk and boil it up in some salt water, and you're good to go.
Yeah.
I've never grown those. Are they pretty plants? I mean, they're attractive plants to grow?
Well, here, I mean, you can go out in the anywhere.
It's a big crop for the
Yeah, it's a
for
big
farmers.
crop.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, the kids grew. That was it. Soybeans and carrots were their two favorite plants for them to grow themselves, and they were here when they were ready to harvest them too.
Yeah.
That was up to them. That and the strawberries. Yep. Oh, parsnips are my replacement for white potatoes because of nightstand issues and arthritis. Well, that's cool. There we go.
Oh, that sounds good. What a great idea that is.
Yeah, never knew about that.
So,
Awesome.
Erin, do you give talks at events and?
Yes, I do. Yep, I do on occasion. I don't have a lot of time to do that, but I do. This year, obviously, I haven't done any, but I have in the past. Yeah.
I just
everything got canceled this year, so.
Yeah. They should just cancel the year.
yeah
Right.
this year
We can move on.
This year's been a bust.
Yep.
Yes, it has been. It has been.
Erin, I wish you could come do a talk in New York sometime after this virus is sorted out. Love your channel. That's Barbara Bennett.
Oh, well, that's really sweet. I love New York. I'd love to come.
Barbara, where in New York are you? I was born in Rochester. Oh, nightshades bother arthritis. Didn't know that. Didn't know that. I want one of those raised beds like Reap What You Sow have, and who else? The ones that are waist high.
I'm all about high raised beds. When we built our raised bed garden, I think our raised beds are 21 inches tall.
Oh, wow.
And I would actually go a few inches taller. They're fabulous. I don't have any interest whatsoever in having to bend over any more than I have to.
Yeah, well, our friends, they're in Louisiana. When we went to a conference last year, we stayed with them for a few days, and they have, gosh, I don't know how many acres. So for them to get dirt, they take their tractor out with the dump thing on front of it, get some dirt, and bring it back. Can't do that here.
No.
Yeah, I don't think our neighbors would like for me to go rent a tractor and dig up their front yard for dirt.
Some of them I would. Near Albany. Cool. Yep. Oh, rhubarb leaves as mold for concrete leaves. Yeah, that would be great, Brenda. You're right. Rhubarb leaves or the horseradish leaves, Brenda, because they're huge. I mean, I can bring you some if you'd like, because I'll be seeing you in 3 weeks.
I see the tinker's wife is saying that hers are 24 inches tall.
Well,
Oh my God.
Brenda, and Brenda's, her raised beds are 3 feet. She has to rub it in. I've seen her raised beds on her live streams. Yep.
So, in Wisconsin this year, with all of the happenings that have happened, how has this affected your gardening? Has it at all?
The only way it has affected it is that, of course, like I think everywhere, things sold out very, very, very quickly. So getting plants was not easy. Fortunately, typically order things like seeds and stuff, I order all my seeds pretty early. So I had most of what I needed in terms of seeds and things well before anything was really happening. Because I heard these horror stories of people not being able to get seeds, and actually I did several swaps with people who were looking for seeds for specific things and just couldn't find them. So personally, the only way it really affected me was like it was very hard to find. At some point, it got very difficult to find like seed starting mix and any sort of supplies related to starting seeds, because everybody started growing a garden, which I am fully in favor of. But it got very difficult to find sort of some of the basic supplies. And that was probably the biggest, relative inconvenience. It was probably good. It forced me to get a little creative with a few things. So that was probably okay.
And because of that, now there is a shortage of canning jars and lids.
I did not know. There you go.
Because all of a sudden people goes, oh, I better grow my own food. Now what do I do? I have to learn canning. And those of us that have canned for years, it's like you go to the store and you use up your stock, but there's none on the counters or the shelves in the stores anymore. So folks are having to get creative.
I will say, though, that fortunately it does not appear that the stores have taken huge advantage of it price-wise.
Some of them have.
Well, I don't know if it's huge. But.
Right, yeah. Some of them have gouged. Chris Hansen, do you use Fox Farm products, and what is a good organic fertilizer for you?
I have used some Fox Farm products. I don't really have a fertilizer that I swear by. I think a lot of them, when you're looking at those organic fertilizers, are similar. I did use quite a few Fox Farm things this year, actually. They have a kelp fertilizer that I quite like, and that I use that on on my flowers and things, on my dahlias. That's really the only fertilizer I'll put on stuff in the ground once it's been growing for a while. I do often use the Espoma granular products. But I've not found a big difference between organic fertilizers in terms of one working better than another. I haven't tried a lot of them, but I have not found a huge difference that I'm brand loyal to one thing over another.
Do you have issues in your garden with like deer, rabbits, creatures? And
I have a lot of issues with deer. And this year, a lot of issues with rabbits. So the deer situation I manage with deer repellents. The one that I've been using for a couple of years now that I like the best is called Deer Stopper. Actually, it's Deer Stopper 2. It's by a company called Messina. And I buy it in a big concentrated gallon, and then I put it into a pump sprayer, and I apply it with a pump sprayer. And so long as I'm vigilant about applying that after it rains, it seems to do fine. Now, supposedly they say it will last throughout a rain. I don't trust it, and that's not really been my experience unless it's a very light rain. So I'm pretty vigilant about doing that, applying that deer repellent, because we live not even a quarter mile away from a state park, which has a large herd of deer who don't stay in the state park. and then this year the rabbit population is huge, and I find rabbits to be more difficult to deal with than deer, actually, because well, for one, it's harder to exclude them from something, but two, the deer repellent, in my experience, does not keep the rabbits away. So I find that granular deterrents work better for rabbits, but even those, I don't think those get in the way of a hungry rabbit too well, So I use like a liquid fence granular, or there's Plant Skid. I like Plant Skid too. So those are my two biggest problems. We never used to have rabbit problems here. We used to have a very healthy fox population in our neighborhood, and I never saw a rabbit. And boy, I wish those foxes would come back.
Just looking back through the list here, making sure we didn't miss anything.
Nope, got them all.
Someone says, I caught a deer with her hoofs in my garden.
Red-handed, so to speak.
Exactly.
Yeah, the thing with deer is that you have to sort of. My theory on it is that you have to train them a little bit. So I spray pretty much the entire garden, whether it's something that they're likely to eat or not, because I feel like, one, if the whole garden sort of smells bad to them, that's good. But two, especially the young deer seem to try anything and everything. So if the first time they taste it, I have no idea if this deer psychology of mine is actually true, but I go with it. If the first time or second time they taste it, it tastes pretty yucky, they seem to generally avoid that plant. So I go with that. I just spray everything. I finally got a backpack sprayer just to make it a little quicker and easier than the regular pump one.
The tinker's wife is asking if you've tried hot pepper oil for rabbits.
No, I haven't. Should I? I'm all for that.
Well, we know some people that do that.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody else is asking if you have any suggestions. Let's see, this is from Naturally NC. Any suggestions for preventing hornworms?
Do you know that I'm knocking on wood here? I have never had a hornworm in my garden that I'm aware of.
Oh.
So I don't have any suggestions on preventing them. I'm really, when it comes to insects, I'm all about just keeping an eye on it and hand picking things. So I don't like to. I'm sure that like BT spray could assist with that, but I don't like to do that unless I would have to. So I would say just keep an eye out for them. I do know that hornworms are, at least tomato hornworms, will glow under a black light. So if you go out when it's getting a little dark out and you take a black light out there, they light up like a Christmas tree, and you can find them really easy.
Lee's Arkansas bound. How do you feel about seed saving?
Well, I think seed saving is wonderful. I think I should do more of it, to be honest. But seed saving is, well, A, economical, but B, it's why we have so many of these great plants. I'm growing a lot of dwarf tomatoes this year from the Dwarf Tomato Project that Craig LaHoulier and he wrote Epic Tomatoes, and several other people sort of combined on this dwarf tomato project. And they had to rely on some really old heirloom seeds to create these natural crosses that they were working on. And, if you don't have that seed library of these great heirlooms, we lose important plants. So I think seed saving, generally speaking, is really important. But B, I think it's quite satisfying to do yourself. I tend to save seeds that are very easy to save. So I save poppy seeds because it literally can't get any easier than like dumping out the seed pod into a bag. Yep. And I save a lot of Nicotiana. And this year I inadvertently created my own Nicotiana cross. So that was sort of fun. It won't be stable, of course, but it's a hybrid of Nicotiana Langsdorffii and Nicotiana alata, and it's quite a lovely plant. And I don't think it'll ever be stable, but that's okay. I'm enjoying it this year. So
yeah, that's cool.
Do you have any in-ground problems like moles and mice and things like that?
There are a lot of mice around here. They don't seem to cause too much problem in the garden, and there are voles around here. So it is. I have not experienced them in my garden, but I think it's kind of a foregone conclusion at some point they're going to find me. So, but it's not something I deal with at this point. So I'm pretty fortunate as far as pests go. It's mostly the furry guys with four legs that are causing problems.
Well, Broussard Homestead, who is in Louisiana.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we have some Louisiana friends in here.
Mm-hmm. What can I spray on my garden to repel hurricanes?
Oh, I feel so bad for them. I wish I had the magic solution. Those poor
Yep.
folks. My gosh. I hope they're all going to be okay. I'm thinking about all of them.
Yep. So Broussard Homestead, Brett and Amy hosted a conference no, it wasn't really a conference. It was a meetup last year in Louisiana, and we had a blast.
Oh, I bet.
Oh,
How can
yeah.
you not have fun in
Oh,
Louisiana?
yeah. We had a blast, and unfortunately,
With the heat there, it's very easy to not have fun. Is it hot?
especially when you're from Ohio, you're not used to that.
Right.
But it was a nice trip, and this year's got canceled because
Right.
you can have demonstrations of more than 10 people, but you can't have a meetup or a wedding or a funeral of more than 10
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just have told everybody just call it a demonstration. There you go.
How about in your area for what many people affectionately refer to as stink bugs, or the
We have
are they as bad there as they seem to be everywhere else around the country?
I don't have a huge problem with them, but they are here. I mean, I don't have an enormous problem with them, but they're around for sure. And we deal with all those other little critters too. Japanese beetles. It's not been a terrible year for Japanese beetles in our particular area. That seems to really ebb and flow, where those are a real problem. And squash bugs are a real pain in the neck. So, and the big sort of insect type problem that we have here, and I don't know if you guys have this in where you are, is the Asian jumping worm. So, have you heard about these invasive earthworms?
No.
So it's
Do
an
they put on a
invasive
show?
invasive earthworm. And it's been around for a while. It's a huge problem in Wisconsin. The main thing they're worried about is it getting into agricultural areas and forests. But they are extraordinarily aggressive worms. They live right on the top of the soil, in organic matter, and churn that up. And they eat so much so quickly that they churn that soil over. And what you end up with is really nothing left of the top part of the soil at all. Your soil ends up looking like coffee grounds. So the University of Wisconsin is leading, and the Wisconsin DNR is leading a lot of the research on this, trying to figure out how to deal with them at the UW Arboretum in Madison. It's sort of where they were first discovered in Wisconsin, was there, which was I think in 2014, and they have them all over the place. And for a long time, I'm a master gardener volunteer, so we learned about this early on and how we were supposed to prevent getting them. And the problem is that they have 3 life cycles in the course of 1 year. You get 3 generations.
Wow.
So they're prolific, and the eggs are tiny. And so if you got a plant from somebody, there could be an egg on the roots. And if you got soil from somewhere or mulch from somewhere, they could be in there. And I'm sure one of those ways is how they got to my gardens. I mean, for a while they were sort of canceling garden tours in the state because they didn't want people accidentally taking home eggs on their shoes and carrying it around. Well, I think now everyone sort of decided we all pretty much have it. So it's just something to deal with. So they've been researching that to try to figure out how to manage that situation. And so I have them in my garden. They're really disgusting. They call them, they're also known as snake worms, and they thrash around, and you find a big group of them all in one place. They're really unappealing. So I just deal with it and hope that the university comes up with some sort of management system for them. Beyond that, all you can really do is just make sure you water your plants really deeply so they're putting down deep roots, not surface roots, where the soil is going to get affected. But at the Arboretum, they had a whole row, like a hedgerow basically, of arborvitaes. And a storm came through, and all of the arborvitaes tipped over about 45 degrees because there was nothing really left in the soil to hold those roots in anymore. So I think they're mostly concerned. I mean, obviously it's a It's a problem for home gardeners, but I think the bigger concern is the situation if it becomes a problem in agriculture fields, obviously a
Yeah.
big deal in Wisconsin, or in the forests.
Wow.
Drops Family Garden is asking if there's a white paper on those worms. Where
Yes,
can they get more?
yes, there is. Yep, if they search for jumping worms, the Wisconsin DNR and UW have created a lot of papers together. So there's a lot of papers on those that you can find out more about them. I always do the old, like jumpingworm.edu in the Google search, and that way you get the university sites.
We got some folks from Texas here asking how did you get started in gardening? Was it passed down from your mother, or?
I started gardening. My mom is a big gardener, so I gardened as a child, and so I was around gardening. And then I sort of went on with life. And then once I got out of college and started living in my own apartments, I started trying to grow a few things in containers, and one container turned into 2, into 20, and then we decided we better find a place with some more area to garden in. So we bought a house.
You've talked a lot about containers for gardens. Now I've got some opinions on different containers. So would you share with me what, in your mind anyway, constitutes a good container and one they shouldn't even be sold in the stores?
Okay, so my number one criteria for a good container is big, size. Because these tiny little containers, they just dry out faster than you can water them. Soil volume equals root volume equals place for water to go. No matter what you're growing, a bigger container is better. And I have not a lot of containers, but I have big containers that I can put a lot of plants in those. So that's my number one thing. And then, of course, the next thing to look for is drainage. Nice big drainage holes, or the ability to some sort of material that you can easily add additional drainage holes to.
Lisa Lee is asking, do you have specific goals for your YouTube channel?
Oh gosh. My whole goal with my YouTube channel is to just, the whole Impatient Gardener philosophy is sort of inspiration and education. So I always try to sort of do a science-based approach or a research-based approach to what I'm sharing, because I don't want to just throw out a bunch of garden myths that people aren't going to have success with, because my goal is I want more people to garden, and I want people to have success gardening, because then they stick with gardening. So that's number one, is that I'm always about trying to find something that I can share to help people enjoy gardening more, or become better gardeners, or just inspire them a little bit more. And so that's really it. If I can just keep people enjoying gardening and inspiring to try something or grow something, that's good for me.
Chris Hansen is saying in here they need to invent a springform bottom plant container.
Oh, well, there you go.
Chris, it's
get on that, Chris.
Yeah, get on it, Chris. Well, let's see. Yeah, a lot of people are commenting here. A common theme seems to be going through here: the science of gardening. What behind it. So, do you have any? I'm going to say higher formal education into the.
No, not in gardening at all. No, I went to school, and I'm actually a journalist in my regular life. I'm the editor of a magazine, so that's what I do for my 9 to 5. So no, I have no formal upper education in horticulture at all, except that I did when I became a master gardener. Of course, there's some training involved in that, but it's nothing like any sort of horticultural degree or anything like that.
Well, no, wait a minute. I missed this on that you're a magazine editor. What you're holding back on us here? What's
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I'm the editor of a magazine called Sailing Magazine.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I like I said, sailing is sort of my other passion, which is true, and I'm very fortunate to work in my sort of 9 to 5 job in something I'm passionate about, and then my second job, which is the Impatient Gardener, something else I'm passionate about. So it works out good for me.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So, and I've got, since the door's been open now, I have to ask, you're certainly not what I would consider to be in the sailing capital of the world. How did you get involved in sailing?
Oh, well, you know what? We actually are in not the sailing capital of the world, but pretty close. The Great Lakes are a fabulous place to sail. So my family has sailed. So I grew up sailing. I was on a boat before I could walk. So I was really fortunate to grow up around the water and on the water. And my husband also is a sailor. That's how we met. So it's what we do.
So do you have a boat?
No, I do what I call the the economical solution to boats is what we call OPBs, which is other people's boats. So we sail on other people's boats.
Yeah.
I like that.
I used to have a sign that said the definition of a boat was a hole in the water that you throw money into.
It's not wrong.
You also had one.
Yeah, I've had a couple. So since you love the water and sailing and all that, does that lend into fishing and stuff as well?
We have some neighbors who have a fishing boat, and about once a year we go out for a cocktail cruise and go fishing. And once we caught a fish, and that worked out pretty well. But that's about it. That's about my experience with fishing.
I love it.
You know, I love coming up with these off the cuff questions because you can just watch her squirm a little bit.
Enriched Refuge, yes, she is married. Yep, they all liked your OPB's comment.
Yeah.
Yeah, somebody else is saying here, Wisconsin is also great for ice racing.
It is. Yes, we have an ice boat in our garage right now. At this very moment, it hasn't been used for several years because the last time it was used, my husband went through the ice on it, and I think it still has a hole from when we had to drill the hole to let the water out. By the way, going through the ice when you're ice boating is not ideal.
Oh, Lordy, I would think not.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, this not really the time of year right now to do that.
God.
No, it's not. And I'd be okay if we had the kind of winter where it wasn't exactly good for that either. I'd be happy with an easy winter this year.
So I have to ask you because I've been staring at it for an hour now. Is that a gardenia picture behind you?
No, it's a chestnut. It's a horse chestnut.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
This is one of these. It's a vintage botanical
That is
poster.
cool. I like that. That is cool.
So,
Thank you.
so you didn't paint that?
I did not paint that. Nope, that was an Etsy find from several years ago.
That is cool. Drops Family Garden. Do you think of using chickens or fowl to eliminate the jumping worm issue?
I would love to do that. I actually would love to get some guinea fowl. That would solve a lot of problems around here, including ticks. That would, well, maybe not solve, but help with. That doesn't seem to get a lot of support from Mr. Much More Patient. So that's what I call my husband. So far I've been striking out on the poultry.
Yeah, Toad in the Garden. That picture is beautiful, and I could have sworn it. I mean, it looks just like a gardenia leaf.
I have over here. There's an oak leaf one. If you can see that one, that's the oak leaf one.
Oh, those are cool.
Over there, and then that's the horse chestnut there.
That one's pretty. Now I like that. It's amazing what you can find on Etsy.
Isn't it though?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, in addition to your sailing and your gardening, what other hobbies do you have?
Well, those two hobbies don't leave a lot of time for anything else once I'm done with once I'm done with doing all the Impatient Gardener stuff and my regular stuff, I could really stand to pick up like a winter hobby because I got a lot of summer things. I like paddle. I do a lot of paddle boarding, or when I can. So I like stand-up paddle boarding, and that's that. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else I do. I don't have a lot of other hobbies.
If
I spend a lot of time dreaming about gardening.
If I'm too nosy, tell me to shut up. But do you have any?
No, you keep nosing. I'll tell you when to stop.
Shut up, Daryl.
Do you have any offspring? I mean, do you have any kids that you are bringing up to your thought processes on gardening, and do you enjoy working with kids?
We have no kids, and I do enjoy working with kids. Although since I'm not a parent myself, I'm not necessarily a natural with kids, So I like, especially for like our Master Gardener projects, I like working with some of the older kids. I just speak better to older kids, so
part of the impatient thing, I suppose.
Right, but that's frankly why I have time to do all the things I do. I mean, if I had kids, there's no way I would have time to spend. It's a luxury for me to be able to spend as much time as I do, just messing about in my garden and doing the other things that I enjoy, and that's not something I would probably have the time for if I had kids. I do have dogs and a cat.
Well, I see
who are not kids.
I see that Drops Family Garden has mentioned a term in here that I thought about earlier and didn't ask. That they're going to be doing some microgreens and baby greens and stuff indoors. Do you consider that type of gardening as well, where you really don't even have a chance to plant those in the ground? You're just sprouting them and eating them.
I tried it last year and it was really fun. I'm going to do it again. Microgreens. What I liked about it was that I did it in winter, and so I had fresh food that I had grown right there, and that was the best part for me. And they go pretty quick. So and apparently they're extremely nutritious. So I enjoyed doing that, and I'll do more of that. This year.
Do you have any new projects for the garden in the next 6 months?
No, because I did this really. It seems like most of the gardening projects that end up happening around here happen because we lose a tree. So we're on a pretty heavily wooded lot here, and like a lot of places over the past few years, we've lost many trees, many ash trees to emerald ash borer, and so it seems like every time I have another big gardening project happen, it's because another ash tree has had to be moved out. So this past spring, I did a garden that I think was now I'm not great at math, but I believe it was about 3,200, 3,400 square feet, where a giant ash tree had gone away. And it was sort of at the end of our driveway at the entrance to our property. And when the ash tree was there were sort of native plants / weeds kind of growing there, but there was enough shade cast by it that everything was sort of kept in check. And then once that ash tree went away, that whole area just exploded in a mass of messy old weeds. So I redid that whole thing. So I'm just kind of managing that project, making sure that moves into winter in a good place, weed free and in a good place so that it comes out in spring well. And I try to hold off on doing big garden projects every year. It seems like I catch the bug every couple of years and there's another new big project. But I'm trying to restrain myself a little bit to keep my maintenance at a level that is reasonable.
Mary's Garden Grows is asking, what are your favorite places to order your seeds from?
That's a great question. So I like Select Seeds for interesting flowers. They have a lot of flower varieties that are different and interesting. Swallowtail Garden Seeds, I also order some flower seeds from there. For vegetables, Renee's Garden has some really interesting varieties. In particular, they seem to really have a nice selection of varieties for containers. So they have like a container zucchini, and they have a container everything. So they have some really different and interesting varieties. So I usually check there for vegetables. I like to support Jung Seeds, which is a Wisconsin company. So I will order some vegetable seeds from them. And I'm trying to think where, I mean, I don't really have one place where I pick it all up because I've never found everything I want in one place. Johnny Seeds is always, always has really nice vegetables too. So that's probably it. And then I will pick up little things here and there.
I've heard you talk a lot about perennials. Do you prefer growing, or, well, how do I want to ask this? Do you prefer growing perennials to annuals? Or?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I necessarily prefer it, but I see the advantage in perennials. Obviously, it's less work, it's less time, mostly. It's typically less water, although honestly, I grow most of my garden pretty hard. I don't do a lot of supplemental watering outside of containers. So, I mean, I would describe my garden as a mixed borders, basically, with trees, shrubs, perennials, annuals, and bulbs in them. I think there's pretty much a little bit of that everywhere in my garden. But as I get a little bit more realistic about how much time I have to maintain the garden, I do start thinking about more permanent solutions, which would, for me, in a lot of cases, be perennials. And there's some really cool plants out there, so it is fun to discover cool perennials and try growing something that's a little bit different and a little bit out of the ordinary. I enjoy finding and researching a new plant and learning how to grow it. I that's very, very fulfilling for me. But on the other hand, I like, in particular, right off our patio, I like a lot of color right there. So that's generally leads to annuals. And so there are a lot of annuals tucked in there, most of which are dahlias, frankly. So I would never want to be without any one of them, but I recognize that I need to start shifting a little bit more to shrubs and perennials in some areas where I've been planting a lot of annuals, just to be a little bit realistic about maintaining the garden.
How many hours a week would you say it takes you to maintain your gardens?
It varies so much. In spring, I mean, I think in spring, obviously, it's a lot more work. I would say in spring, it's probably conservatively, I would say maybe 12 to 15 hours on a weekend, and then I'll throw in, once it's light out enough out at night, I'll throw in a couple hours 2 or 3 nights a week. So it could end up being 20 hours a week in spring, during sort of that cleanup, get everything organized stage and planting stage. But this time of year, my jobs in the garden are mostly a little bit of weeding, watering the containers. I'm now watering the containers every day because everything's big enough now that it needs that, and it's been so dry here. And then just checking on the vegetable garden and doing my neatening in the vegetable garden. I probably spend maybe an hour and a half in the vegetable garden. Every Saturday morning is my vegetable garden time, where I just clean up things and keep an eye on everything and replant where it's needed and clean up. Otherwise, it's just a daily trip out to the vegetable garden to go harvest what I need to, or make sure there's no big issues developing somewhere.
Patty, the tinkerer's wife, have you thought about aging in your future garden? If so, please explain.
I have, and that's part of what concerns me about all these plants I have, and that's definitely part of this idea of leaning more towards shrubs and perennials. I mean, I look at my mom is still gardening. She's got a large garden, and I look at how much work she's putting into the garden, and I recognize that the way I garden right now is not the way I'm going to want to garden in another 25 years. So I do sort of have an eye towards a lower maintenance situation. And by that, I do mean, in particular, shrubs. I mean, really, if you're looking for lower maintenance, most perennials need a little bit of maintenance too. So a shrub is usually a pretty nice option. So I am trying to do that. And so, for instance, in the new garden that I just planted this year, I'm taking a different approach to maintaining that. I planted a lot of cultivars of native plants, which was sort of the feel of that garden. It was kind of a naturalistic type style garden. But my goal is to not have to be in a situation where I have to go in there and throw on a bunch of mulch or anything. I'm going to leave everything standing, and in spring I'm going to cut everything back and let it lay on the ground and let the sort of the plant litter become the mulch, which will be difficult for me because it's not a neat look at first, when it starts breaking down. But Roy Diblick is a fabulous gardener. He's also from Wisconsin, and I've really been reading a lot of his books and following him. He's got a YouTube channel as of this year as well. And he's quite interesting to listen to about how plants want to live. So I'm trying to sort of incorporate some of that into my gardening. And that whole idea, I mean, some of these people take a lawnmower to these gardens and just mow them down. And I don't know that I have that in me. But these are some of the things that I'm sort of looking at as I go forward in the garden about how I can be realistic about what I'm going to want to do in this garden as I move forward, and as I get older and maybe don't want to spend as much time or can't for some reason.
Okay, Drops Family Garden says, do you know about Diamond in Colorado? I'm not sure where that's going, but so I'll just ask the question. Do you know about Diamond in Colorado?
No, I don't.
Maybe they were talking to somebody else. I don't know.
Have you thought about permaculture garden?
I think it's quite interesting. And I mean, I think there are some aspects of permaculture that I try to incorporate. I think it's an area where I need to learn a lot more and read more about that. I do love the sort of the learning part of gardening. For me, it's one of the reasons why I think gardening is a lifelong activity, because nobody ever knows it all. And there's all these opportunities to keep learning. And that's something that I am trying to learn more about and figure out ways that I could incorporate more of that into what I'm doing here.
And Drops Family Garden is asking, have you considered cover crops?
I have, and I have grown them on occasion. In the vegetable garden in the raised beds, I have done a few cover crops. My big problem with cover crops is that by the end of the season, I'm so sort of burned out on gardening that to go and tend a cover crop, to, water it and get those seeds established and get it growing decently, like you need to do with any plant, it's hard for me to work up the enthusiasm to do that. So that's why I haven't been as successful with those as I have been in the past. But I love the idea of cover crops. I'm fully in favor of them, and I should probably be better about doing that in my garden.
I'd actually like to put, and I've mentioned this to Daryl, he thinks I'm nuts, is put fruit trees out where most of our garden is out back. We didn't get to it this year. I had surgery in May, so I wasn't able to. And like I said, we have a beautiful crop of purple thistle weeds.
And other flavors as well.
Other flavors, yeah. We do. I still have garlic out there that I never harvested. Onions from last year that are still out there. My rhubarb, my horseradish will come up every year anyway. And walking onions that are definitely walking throughout my garden now.
Well, you can only do, that's the one thing about gardening that's quite great, is that you can only do what you can do. And if you don't do it this year, you get to it next year. It'll wait.
Yeah.
Don't wait. Sometimes you create a little bit more work for yourself in the process, but it'll be there when you get to it.
Yeah. Well, it got bigger than what I think we planned on at the beginning, but when we first moved in, we had family members living here, so we had more people. So
Right.
we had a big garden. Well, now there's just the two of us. It's like,
Right.
you don't need that big of a garden anymore.
Right.
I'd rather have the fruit trees.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. Well, it's 10:20, dear.
Yes, it is. So, another quick question here: if you have some advice to give to anybody in the chat here tonight, what might that be?
Like gardening advice, or
Yes,
what kind of advice?
Yes, yeah. We're kind of sticking to the garden. Maybe sailing advice. I don't know.
Sail on other people's boats; it's cheaper. No, no. I would say, if you're new to gardening, I think I always tell people, don't bite off more than you can chew, because that's a good way to get burned out quick. Grow what you like to eat. But I think always try growing something new. A new vegetable, a new flower, whatever it is, and experiment a little bit. You don't have to cover your whole garden in it, but try out different things, learn about new plants, and I think it makes you a better gardener. I think it makes gardening more interesting, and I think it keeps the enthusiasm going a little bit.
Jerry, what last words from you here?
Diamond is Oppenheimer Ranch Project is what Diamond in Colorado is. Thank you for explaining that. Yep. No, I've had learning.
It's been very interesting.
Not only
tonight.
from Erin, but from a lot of the folks here in the chat. I'm learning more and more things, and going to trade seeds. Aren't you excited to get to trade seeds?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, ma'am. My. What is every time you do one of these, it costs me more work.
We didn't this year. We didn't do squat.
So anyway, Erin, thank you so much for being here with us. We have had an absolute wonderful time. Special thank you to all of our moderators out there. And I know that you'll probably go back and look at this, but they've been posting regular updates to your to your YouTube channel, to your Facebook, I believe, and website. And
Yes.
nobody knew until 70% of the way into the show that you had anything to do with a sailing magazine, and we really want to have updates to that. But if people want to get a hold of you, wait a minute, I can go look. No, you don't have it there. If they want to get a hold of you, can they get a hold of you through your website? Let me look there.
You can get a hold of me through my website, but you can also reach, if you want to just send me an email, you can always send me an email. It's Erin at theimpatientgardener.com, ERIN.
Okay.
Or you can reach out to me through Instagram or Facebook or Facebook's not great, actually. Instagram, I'm pretty good about getting back on messages pretty quickly on Instagram, and always emails too. So people should feel free to reach out to me. But I just want to say how nice it's been to talk to you, and you guys have such a wonderful community here, and I appreciate everyone who's popped into the chat, and I enjoy seeing all your friends in these conversations, and so many very wise people with a lot of knowledge to share. So it's been wonderful. Thank you.
There is a lot of knowledge. That is true.
Yeah, a tremendous amount of knowledge. I guess that's probably about going to do it. Oh, if I talked about the moderators, thank you so much. There's a few folks dressed in green around here. If you'd like to become a member of Smudge's People, you can click that join button down below. We'd love to have you. Got some more stuff going out again next month, and so
there is Heartland Homesteaders Picnic in Grand Rivers, Kentucky, September 12th.
And we will be at that.
And everyone is invited. It's not just for homesteaders. Quite a few folks are hosting that. There is going to be a seed swap. There is a, Teresa, correct me if I'm wrong, a venison cook-off, correct?
Yep. Yep.
And like Daryl said, we will be doing the live stream again this year. And Mr. Smudge will be there in all his glory. And we're trying to get folks, if they want to order mugs and T-shirts ahead of time. And we'll bring some other goodies to sell. And there's going to be, I think, other vendors there also. There were last year. Correct, Teresa?
Oh, Erin, another quick question. What's the leaves in your logo there?
Oh, that's ginkgo.
Ginkgo. That sounds
I
like,
guess that's on the other side, but yes,
that sounds like
yeah,
a
those are
lizard.
ginkgo leaves, and I like ginkgo trees. I actually think they're just really cool looking. It's not like they're my favorite tree necessarily. I just think they're really cool.
Okay. Well, with that, we're going to let everybody go. Thank you all for being here tonight. We certainly appreciate each and every one of you.
Next week's guest? He said yes.
Go ahead.
The Naked Gardener.
So, nudity is optional next week.
Oh, Lord, Daryl. Oi. Yeah, it's been nice knowing you folks. We'll no longer be on YouTube.
And just remember, if you hold your nose, you can't hum. Have a nice evening, folks.
Jeez, night, everybody.